Hi folks, welcome to the video. Time to do some simple hills for some quick and easy scatter terrain to throw down nice and quick on your table, add a little bit of depth to what you're doing, and to make things a little more interesting than a flat table. So stage 1, you take your foam sheet, or whatever you like to use. For this I'm using 8mm insulation foam for this, because it's nice to get your different depth of stacked layers once you blend them all together. And then all you do is you take your pen, your pencil, whatever you like to use, make a mark that you can see. You can press as hard or as gently as you like, and then once you've done that, you take your knife, whether it be a craft knife, Stanley knife, scalpel, whatever you like to use, personal preference. For this one I'm using the bigger craft knife. Then you just cut out all the shapes you've made, and once you've got all those shapes made, you need to stack them up to one side, check them all out, make sure they all look relatively clean enough. Doesn't need to be anything too pretty, and most importantly, once you're finished with this stage, what you've got to do is then take all your little offcuts and bits and pieces that are left and just clear them out of the way, because I have a lot of space, and I know some people who do this don't exactly have a lot of spare space to keep stuff lying around. So keep the place tidy. It just makes life so much easier in the long run if you can keep the place tidy as you go. Now, once you've done that, you want to just take your next stage, which is number 3, and you want to take whatever knife you're choosing to use, and then you just want to bevel off some of the edges on the shapes and areas you've cut out to use, to give them a more natural blended look down to either the surface of the table or the piece of hill you're going to put below them when you stack them up later on and glue them together to give you the height that you want for some of your hills. This doesn't need to be particularly pretty. If you look very closely, you'll see that mine most definitely is not. However, later stages that you come to will tidy off any slightly unpretty edges you've left, or things that don't look very terribly pleasing to the eye. So you just take your time doing this. Don't want to rush it too much. We are playing with sharp knives. We've had some accidents in the past, especially I have. I'm sure anyone in this hobby has definitely had any accidents with knives will know that you don't want to play with them too much. So once that's done, just separate your piles, keep the nice finished beveled edges, parts of the hill, the layers to one side, and then scrape off any other cuttings and tidy ups, and then just head them straight into the bin, because you won't be needing them anymore. So, stage 4, nice and easy. Now you get to play essentially Jenga with what you've cut out. You take the shapes you've made, the cuts, the styles, you stack them up as high or as low as you want. You can leave some as singles, you can leave doubles, triples, quadruples, whatever height you like. Some things may need a little bit of an extra slice and prune, with an extra little bevel on some of the edges, just to fit them together in a little more desirable shape. But essentially, this stage is for playing with it. You play with them, you see how you like them, you find out what ways you think look best. Practice, again, is something that helps with this. Once you've made a couple of sets of these, you get a little bit better at stacking them to be the shapes and sizes that you want. You start to learn the sizes and the slopes you can cut to allow minis to stand on, and just generally it looks nice. And then once you're done on that, you take your glue I've used just some PVA for this. I've always used PVA for this. I've used hot glue in the past, but again, with hot glue and with foam that is this thin, you need to remember to keep the temperatures just a little on the cooler side with a hot glue gun if you were doing this, because at this thickness it will melt pretty quickly without you realising it at too high a heat. So once you've done that, stick them all together, layer them up, and then just put them on one side to dry for overnight is good for PVA, because with obviously PVA needing air to dry, it's a little bit safer if you just leave it that slightly longer time, just to be sure it's good and set before you move on to the next stage. So, stage 6, next one you want to get to. You take some of the hills that you like. This is something I've been doing for a board I'm putting together recently now, to make them even smoother and less angular than the finish you might get. You want to take some all-purpose filler, or spackle as some people in the world call it. This is the finest of Tesco value all-purpose filler. I believe I picked this up for a couple of quid when I went shopping the other day, when I'd run out of the dial stuff I'd been using. And you just slap it all over, all down, smooth it off, fill it in a little bit more to give you that nicer, more even finish that you might want to be looking for. Leave it as rough as you like, or as smooth as you like. Add some water, it'll smooth it out real nice. Just dunk your fingers in, get them nice and wet, and then just smooth out the surface. Or if you like the rougher look, leave the rougher look, depending on what kind of surface you're going for in your final finished product. Now, on stage 7, I will use this stage for most foam things I'm using for this type of scatter terrain, for any bases that will have heavy use of minis going over them. I will use to seal them in. This is basic, simple, just textured house paint. It is bog standard wall paint for indoor use with some texture in it. I believe I bought non-textured paint to begin with, and then realised when I was for a previous project that it would look nicer if it made texture, so I took some sand I had lying around in the garage and just mixed it in, made a texture paint, and these work as a base sealant. It hardens them off, keeps them protected, and keeps the models that little bit more sturdy for when you get them down on the table to use them. I find it's best to do this in 2 steps. You do the top half, let the top half dry. Once the top half's dry, flip it over, paint the bottom as well, so that all the foam is completely encased in this sealant and texture paint. And I've never had any problems with things that I've painted with this flexing or warping too much in any noticeable manner once it's done. And they end up pretty sturdy and pretty rock solid. I've had stuff throw in and out of boxes and on tables and in and out the backs of cars covered in this stuff in the past, and it's worked out fine. So you use whatever sealant you like. Mod Podge is an option, I've used that in the past. You can get spray paints that are perfectly capable of being sprayed on foam as great sealants and base coats and primers at the same time, but I'm using this method just because I've found it to be the nicest method, and it gets a finish I quite enjoy. So that's the point. Do what you like, do what you find's best. It's all about figuring it out for yourself. So, stage 8, now we're getting into painting. Once you get all your base coating done, I've got the 2 kinds here, the kinds with the filler and the kinds without the filler, just to show you both different results you can get by the end of the video. So your base coating paint is simple, just pick a dark brown. I like to mimic the colours that are under the grass and top textures and surfaces you'll put down. I like to mimic the colours that are underneath to give it a slightly more natural look for areas where the flocking may be thinner later on. I start with a nice dark brown, and then I will dry brush on 2 or 3 other shades, lighter browns, beiges, sandy kind of colours, even up to and including sometimes black or white, just to add up and differentiate the shades and give you a little bit of texture showing through from below. This doesn't need to be pretty, just take your paint, water it down a little, cheapest, nastiest craft paint you can find, water it down a little and slap it on as thick as you like. And then once you do that over all of them, let it dry, and then you can move on to the next part. Stage 9, just a little bit of a dry brush, giving that texture, and I just use for this kind of stuff just big old nasty cheap makeup brushes from Poundland, the finest of the cheap that, quite frankly, the more destroyed they get, the better a job they seem to do of dry brushing. So you take those, dab it in, take your excess, take your base coated one, and then add just as much or as little of a texture or change, just to catch some of the details and highlight a few areas here and there, just to pretty things up a bit and make it look just that smidge more natural. And once you get this stage done, it'll be on to the next, once all the paints have dried. So, on to stage 10. Time to get flocking and things to get sticky again. For my flocking, I use PVA, and then I just water it down with a little bit of water. If I was pushed to give a percentage, I would probably say 70% PVA and 30% water. And I slap it down with a brush, just over all the areas that I want to get anything to stick to. I like to use a smaller brush, just to spread it around a little and let any excess I put on run off. So remember, put some paper down, definitely keep any cutting boards or things you want to keep nice out the way during this process. Let the excess run off, and by the time you've finished spreading around as much as you want to spread around with the brush, then you simply just take your flocking. In this case, I think I've just used a dark grass tone, just a simple straight dark green, nothing too extra added into it, maybe a few little bits and pieces of leftover projects that have fallen in the past. Sprinkle on as much as you want, or as little as you want over the desired areas, and then just knock off any excess you would like back into the tub and just let it collect for later, and then set it aside to dry. So for the separate desert project I was doing for the other ones that were a board I'm putting together, all I've done is just dry brush them up with different sand and beige lighter brown textures, and I'm leaving them plain just the way they are. I might add some sand flocking later just to break things up a little, but really at this point all I'm doing is adding some smaller stones and a little bit of nicer texture with some tacky glue and much stickier PVA, and then I'm just adding little clumps of stones to make that desert theme and that rocky arid terrain play through a little bit more. And at this point, these are mostly done for any desert terrains. They are much quicker and easier to put together for those kind of tables. So, stage 11, nice and easy, just a quick little sealant spray, again just some much more watered down PVA to hold everything in place a little bit more. I just hit everything you've put together and everything you've glued down so far. You can do as many of these stages as you like. I try to leave it to 1 or 2 Just one if you want to try any extra or any flocking on top to hold in a base amount before you add more. In this case, I'm going in with a slightly lighter spring foliage, I believe, light green spring foliage, to add a little bit extra detail to the grassy areas, just to make them pop and make them a little bit that more vibrant on a table and stand out a little from a basic green board that you might be using. And then again, once that's done, any extra flock you put on after you've done some sealant, just give it another spray of sealant again, let it all dry off, let it all end up nice, hard, and it'll be good to go and sorted out for any of your gaming needs in the future. So, stage 13, nearly there now, and this one, technically you're done at this point. This is an optional extra stage you can add in if you so choose. Not all my hills have tufts added, or clump foliage, whatever name you use for it, but I felt like to add something to these ones, I thought I would add a little bit more. So for the desert ones, I'm adding a scorched grass tufts to just add a little bit of life and some darker foliage to the sandier areas. And then for the grassier hills I've used, I'm simply using some highland tufts of grass, a lighter kind of complementary tone to bring it together and just mix it all in a little to make it look nice. For this, again, I'm just using more of the same tacky PVA I used for the loose stones that I added, and that'll give it enough hold to keep them in place once you're done. Again, if you feel like putting some extra sealant down, you can use super glue for this, you can use whatever glues you like. It's a personal preference when it comes to sticking stuff. There's no such thing as a wrong way to do anything, but this is just the way I do it. If you keep going and keep doing things, I'm sure you'll experiment and find out your own ways of happiness of doing things. And that's it. All stages done. You've got your ready to go scattered terrain simple hills to throw down on any table you like to give you that little bit of height and a little bit of sight blockage. Here are some more pictures of things on action on the table, and these are the desert ones, the optionals. Thanks for coming. If you liked what you watched, come back for the next one where we'll do even more scattered terrain that you can throw easy down on a table. See you, folks.